Good evening, everyone. This is Rob Bell, and you're watching Getting the Record Straight. This is our Truth to Power segment, where we talk with folks who have been out there doing things in terms of the Black struggle, and both locally as well as nationally and internationally. Please, when you see this video, subscribe, share, and like it. And thanks for coming out and watching us this evening. I have a tremendous guest with me tonight. This is someone I actually haven't seen in person for almost 20 years. He was here in Philadelphia some time ago to do a talk and lecture and fundraiser for us at Cobra here in Philly some time ago when I was active with them. But here with me this evening is the great Dr. Leonard Jeffries Jr. And Dr. Jeffries, as you may know, is, of course, our esteemed elder. In my estimation, he's a international dean of Black studies. He's certainly, there's very few people, if any, who have done more in terms of Black studies and African studies. Dr. Jeffries is a political scientist, historian, scholar, educator, and Pan Africanist. He's a graduate of Lafayette College and Columbia University. He was the founder and chairman of Black Studies at San Jose State, also founder and chairman of Black Studies at City College of New York, and the founding director of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, ASCAC. So welcome this evening, Dr. Jeffries. How are you?
I am glad to be able to say that I'm above ground and still trying to work with the brothers and sisters and try to find an African way of our victorious march. And so certainly glad to have brothers and sisters like yourself who still, in spite of the virus, give us an opportunity to be a part of this awakening of African peoples.
It's been a long and mighty march, Brother Jeffries.
Well, that's how Dr. Clark described it, a great and mighty walk. And he certainly has laid the foundation of this great and mighty walk. And he passed the torch on to many of us. And our work has been not a walk. We've been trying to find a super highway to the future.
Sure.
That means we've got to master not only the walk and the talk, but we got to master the science, the philosophy. So that's why, as you have often mentioned, since we've been reconnected, that Black Studies is more than activity in a classroom. In fact, Black Studies is life studies, and you have to master it in order to be able to move through life with power and with purpose and meaning, so that most of us think we need to go into a classroom, do some fantastic paperwork, read some books, and then look for that A from our professor. I try to say, I'm so glad to see so many of the students there. Some of our classes were 150 at City College. And it had gotten to the point, if you wanted a good seat just up front, you had to race into the hallways to beat the other students to get a class seat. And so because I always said to our students, you can stay in the back. The Black students want to distance themselves. They get the last rows. Then the Latinos following them would get the rows in front of them. And then the people who are really glued to what you were saying, they would be the Asian students and people who, for the first time, this is what they're hearing. And they would be right up front with the white folks. And so I had to teach over them in order to reach my people. And so I was prepared to take that 150 students and really make it into a learning process, which meant that they took knowledge out of that hall, the classic room there, and took it home. And so that's because I said, look, I want you to do 10 analytical essays. They said, what? I said, yes. And that 10 analytical essays just set you up to get into your term papers. You mean to tell me that 10 analytical essays, that's not the classwork? No, that's just to get you in the flow. You got to do some real term papers, and not just one. You have to do one on a great hero or heroine, and then you have to do another on a particular historical moment, etc. In other words, whatever they expected the class to be was not going to what they couldn't conceive of it. It was going to be a happening. And so that meant that they would, even the first day, they would take the class home. And I told them that y'all are worried about a grade, but look, I have an unusual grading system. We heard that you give out a lot of B's and A's, Dr. J. Yes, but it's not the normal B's and A's. Well, what do you mean? I say, well, if you go into a white class or one of these other classes, non-African Black studies, they may have you into the A, B, and C, and D, and all that. But that's not what our grading is. In other words, we want you to come into this class and be transformed. This is supposed to be a life-transforming process to set you off on another course. And so all of you come in evenly. Anybody who walks in the door has what I call a C. A C for, I used to have a saying that a C was for colored. And a B was for Black. And an A was for African. And the students are scratching their head, man, what the hell is he talking about? I say, look, all of us are miseducated. I don't care how many degrees you got. If you got into white studies or Arab studies or whatever these other studies, Asian studies, it's a miseducation process. And for us, it's a premier miseducation process. So all of you are equal, coming in the door, running to class like many of them did. And so you got a C for just being willing to accept all of this knowledge and begin to process it. And then I said, but if you start to grow in the knowledge, you can move up to a B. And that means you taking this stuff serious, you begin to research it, you're looking at films, you're doing an analysis, and that B is for Black. And however, most of you may not be able to make it to that, to make it to that final A, and that A is for African. So they were thinking in terms of the university's normal process of A, B, and C. No, I said, no, we got a whole nother process here. And so you want to be able to get that African C concept and B concept and A concept. But African philosophy has the law of opposites. And so even though you may be able to rise with the success of doing some serious work, but you may go the opposite way. And you may go to the 3 Ds, doofus, darky, dummy. And they said, what? I said, you could go to the 3 Ds, doofus, darky, and dummy. And you can, instead of going up to that C, B, and A, you can go the other way. In fact, the last D is a devastation. What do you mean, Dr. Jeffries? I said, you can go to a D for serious dummy, and that's Dominican. Oh my goodness, the class, I mean, you could feel it in the class. Did you hear what he said? Did he really say that? And so,
Why did you say that?
Because we got a real problem in our mix of not dealing with Africanness. And some of the people from the Caribbean, particularly the Latin-speaking Caribbean, they can be as black as the ace of spades, but if they come out of the Dominican Republic, they can claim whiteness. In fact, the Prime Minister of the Dominican Republic drew a line through the island of Hispaniola, which has 1/3 of its population is Haiti, 1/3, the other 2/3 is the Dominican Republic. And he drew a line that said anybody, no matter how black they are, if they're born on the Dominican side of the line, they're white. And anybody, no matter how light and bright and white they are, if they're born on the Haitian side, they're black. Now, this is the type of processing into the culture that our people have to do. And no need for me to try to teach Egypt and the ancient cultures and this and that when you got that hanging over you. So my thing was to destroy that, to get in a position where they could begin to deal with the flow of human development and the history as it is available for them, and get rid of that racial mixture. Some of our people used to say, if you're black, they used to have a thing that if you're black, get way back. You know, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, get way back. I mean, this is the games that we used to play.
Yeah.
And damaging our consciousness and our ability to understand the flow of human history. And
when you talk about the flow of human history, when you talk about African studies, Black studies, there are some absolutes, aren't there? There are some things that are right and some things that are wrong.
Well, are been covered up seriously by the things that are wrong. For example, Black folk are not human. In most of human history taken by other people's cultures, they borrowed from us, stole from us, and then said that we were not human. And so that's real. You get a textbook. I used to have a textbook. I just had it in my hand a minute ago when I went into the other room. The history of America. There's not one single positive thing in the 400 pages positive about Black people. So how can that be the history of America? It's a history of white supremacy. And then when you deal with the ancient history, they go to the Greeks. But the Greeks got their foundation, their understanding, their means of moving through the world with power from the African. But you don't hear that. You worship the Greeks. We go into Columbia University and then you go into Burgess Library. It's a temple. On each temple is Sophocles, Plato, Socrates, Phococrates, all of these Greeks are on pillars, and not a single reference to the Africans, and they all got their knowledge from the African. And you go out of the college and you come to a synagogue, and that's the Jewish tradition. And they have pillared temples and all the rest of that. And then in their teaching, they say, we built the pyramids. How the hell can you build a pyramid when you didn't exist when the Great Pyramids were built? So once the truth is there, it shatters all of this other stuff. Now you can restore it and regroup it, but you got to put the foundation of Africanists there. Pyramids were hewn out of the rock in the southern part of the Nile and then brought down on papyrus boats, these gigantic stones, and put in place over a period of 10, 15, or 20 years. 2.5 million stone granite. How the hell can that be done by some little tricks that we say that the handful of Greeks, handful of people of Jewish background built the pyramids? No, we've got to crash, shatter all of that before we can put in the minds of Africans that you are the beginning of the human family. And then they had a paper, and so they had a magazine, The Way We Were, and they had on the cover a caveman. Now the people who got caught up in the caves, unfortunately, was the part of the human family that we refer to as white. And so on the cover, and I just put that away, they had a caveman, and they say the way we were. And when I look at that, I say, no, that's the way you were. We were not in the caves. We were on the riverbanks of the great rivers, looking and studying the universe and building our cultures to the universe. And so that same newspaper, magazine, uh, uh, came out with another issue, and they had on it the origin of humankind. And they had on a black man and black woman in the Garden of Eden. So here they are putting in the common culture all of these conflicts and contradictions. And here we're trying to make some truth out of that. And you try to go to a book. I said, yes, it's in the book. Well, the book that you need to get is Check Ante Diop, Civilization and Barbarism. This is the Bible for our people. Oh no, Dr. J, you can't. You got the other Bibles. I say, which Bible? There's no such thing as the Bible. There's a biblical tradition that goes 4,000 years into the past, going back to the Africans who began to study the universe and put their holy books together. But what Bible are you talking about? Oh, well, you're talking about the Jewish Bible? Well, that's the Torah. Or are you talking about a later edition, and that becomes Prophet Muhammad leaving a certain part of Arabia and going to another part, and out of it comes the biblical tradition that comes from the prophet. And well, you can't stop there, because before the Europeans in Europe start to wake up, and then they want to get into the game, and so they come up with their version, the King James version. A version. That's not even the real deal. And then you get the modern folks coming up out of Utah, following the Mormons. So which damn Bible are you talking about? There's a whole 4,500-year history of biblical tradition. But if you want a real Bible that deals with history and the enormous truth of the human experience, you better grab a hold of Check Ante Diop, Civilization and Barbarism. And this is the Bible that was put in my hands in 19. I became attached to him in a part of his world when I went to Europe in 1959-60. And this is his earlier work called Towards the African Revolution, Renaissance. In other words, various revolutions have taken place, economically, political, cultural revolutions, and they have produced a renaissance, a rebirth of African peoples. And in the middle of this volume is a symbol, and that's the symbol of the George Washington Monument for normal folks in educational processes. But it don't have a damn thing to do with George, the slave master bastard, or Thomas Jefferson, slave master bastard, or Benjamin Franklin, or the rest of them. All of them were slave master bastards. Oh, Dr. Jeffries, you can't talk like that. If they dehumanize African peoples, and over hundreds of years, these so-called modern people dehumanize, I can call them who they are. You got to call them at the truth. George Washington depended upon his slaves. He couldn't handle no plantation. He had to have slave skilled personnel to take care of business. Thomas Jefferson said, not only do I need them to work in the fields, I need them to do the architecture, I need them to do the building, I need to plant the seeds, I need them to do the harvest, but I need to put a special ladder in my mansion, Monticello, and that special ladder is down into the slave quarters. So when I want me some joy in life, I can call for them to come up out of the slave quarters, up the ladder, and into my bedroom. Thomas Jefferson, Sally Hemings was a slave girl at 14 that she was abused by him, and over the years produced many children for him. We got to learn the history, brother. But people,
is that what was the reasoning behind starting ASCAC?
Well, the reason for starting ASCAC was that there were flows of scholars getting a bit of the information. Dr. John Henry Clark, he focused in on West Africa and Southern Africa. And so he trained us. His great work is Africans at the Crossroads, Notes for an African World Revolution. But then he also had a partner in Harlem, Dr. Joseph Ben-Jacquinin. And Dr. Ben-Jacquinin, he took us to the Nile. And so Charles has put up the symbols of resurrection and rebirth that come out of the Nile Valley. And the Europeans fight over each other to take these symbols out of Egypt and bring them to their homeland. The Pope has one in the heart of the Vatican, a pillared temple, and is graced in the center by a symbol of resurrection and rebirth. And then the French, when they were building their culture, they said, we got to have one too. So they brought one out and put it before in the Place de Concorde, their great plaza, right where you have the Louvre. So you've got it in Rome, you've got it in Italy, you've got even Berlin. My wife and I went to Berlin for a conference, and there it was again. Oops, there it is. And of course, when they redid a capital for the United States, the temporary capital being Philadelphia, but the future capital was going to be in land taken from Virginia and from Maryland. And that land was going to be a square on which the new capital was built, imitating the Nile Valley. So I'm saying that we can understand how white folks might have wanted to deal with the borrowing of history, et cetera, but we have to deal with the reality, because they pushed us out of the human family. And that one great brother has clearly, in the 1950s, he wrote his book, Stolen Legacy. And so when you have Dr. Ben talking about stolen legacy, you have Dr. Clark talking about the greatness of African cultures, then we had to organize a national, international movement dealing with this flow of knowledge. And that's what has happened. This Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop mobilized many of the people around him, and he had an elder, a mentor, one of the greatest minds in the history of the world, paid homage and respect to one of the great men that helped him grow and develop. And when you open up, this is his great work, which he produced in the 80s. This is a reflection of his great work by other scholars like Ivan van Sertima, Dr. Asa Hilliard, myself, that produced a book paying a tribute to this great brother and the work that he did and the others that he was inspired by. But I met him in 1959-60 in Paris. Spirit told me to leave Switzerland, where I was working on a certificate for my year of study in Switzerland. And so Spirit said, you need to go to Paris. I said, I haven't left anything. I'm having to talk with the Spirit now. I said, I haven't lost anything in Paris. And I certainly don't need to go to the Champs-Élysées and walk up and down and try and buy a Gucci bag or two. I don't need to go to Pigalle, so I don't need those women standing in the doorway saying, voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? No, but finally Spirit, because I had trouble dealing with the Africans I met in Switzerland. I met these brothers since it was very few Black people. I ran after them. Brother, who are you? Walking down the street, beautiful, tall, and Black as he can be. And then when I caught up with him and tried to introduce myself from America, and then I said, well, who are you? Je suis français. I'm French. And I'm looking at the blue-Black brother that I admire, and then he's talking about he's French. And so I said, well, what can I do? I looked for some others, and every brother after brother, je suis français. So finally, I decided to catch up with some of these light-skinned brothers, because my biological brother is a light-skinned, following after my mother. I follow after my mother's father, Papa. I was born on his birthday, and he was heavy melanized. So I'm running after these brothers that have lack of melanin, and said, brother, who are you? Where are you from? Je suis français. And where were they from? Guadeloupe, Martinique, Guyana, from the French islands of the Caribbean.
Mhm.
And so this put me in a mix of what has happened to our minds that we have been also processed. And so Spirit said, go to France. So I said, well, let me go to France. And so I decided to get on a train in Lausanne, Switzerland, where I was studying. We went through Geneva and then under the mountain Mont Blanc in between Switzerland and France. And we went over to the other side of, and we were in France, and you go to Lyon. And then at Lyon, you change trains and you catch a train up into Paris. And in Paris, I was able to go to the French quarter where they have the university, the student quarter where you have the Sorbonne, and that's where I met Cheikh Anta Diop and his great mentor, and they were having a great battle over whether he should receive a doctoral dissertation, a doctorate. He had been turned down twice, and his mentor Leonard Diop said it's not going to happen a third time. So he got 150 of the greatest minds in Europe, white and whatever they were, radicals or not radicals, and the 150 were there to witness this brother defend his dissertation. And finally, and I was there with the crowd because I was just another student with the folks, but the excitement, this brother was finally given his dissertation. He paid respect and homage to this brother and his wife. They set up a building near the Sorbonne. Actually, it was between the Sorbonne, which is the upper university in France, and the Collège de France, which is the undergraduate work. They built a center called Présence Africaine between those two important institutions. And they built Présence Africaine where you could publish, you could have seminars, you could have link up with scholars around the world. And so Alioune Diop and his great wife built the Présence Africaine that helped Diop dispense his great work. And he dedicated this enormous work, which I tried to translate from French to English. Dr. Clark gave me that responsibility. And it was too difficult. The first 150 pages is the scientist speaking to the world of science. I had to get 30 or 40 books to go through that. But then the latter parts of the book was easy because you're dealing with contemporary, ancient civilization of the Nile and whatnot, not this scientific, heavy stuff. I dedicate this book to the memory of Alioune Diop, who died on the battlefield of African culture. Alioune, you knew what you came to do on this earth. A life entirely dedicated to others, nothing for yourself, everything for others, a heart filled with goodness and generosity, a soul steeped in nobility, a spirit always supreme. Simplicity personified, exclamation point. Did the Demerge want to provide us with an example, a ideal of perfection by calling you into existence? Question mark. Alas, the terrestrial community to which you knew how to convey better than anyone else the message of human truthfulness that sprang from the utter most depths of your being was deprived of you too soon. But the remembrance of you will never be erased from the memory of African peoples to whom you devoted your life. That is why I'm dedicating this book to your memory. Witness the brothership that is stronger than time. Cheikh Anta Dakar, Senegal. And see that relationship with these two great brothers and this great Queen Mother in the mix. That's what we, coming into consciousness, developed. Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben developed a brotherhood of Africa, and they linked up with others in Nigeria and in other parts of Africa. And they also were able to make sure that the women got their share. The European education is centered around educating men. African education is centered around educating people. And so that, it's a family affair. When we're talking about ASCAC, we had been having different organizations and different associations. We said we need to create a family of African peoples interested in this knowledge. And so that meant you had to harmonize the group around Maulana Karanga in California with the group in Atlanta around Dr. Asa Hilliard, with his cousin in Chicago, Jacob Carruthers, and coming out of Texas and then going to Chicago, with our group around Detroit, with the groups in Newark and Philadelphia and whatnot, Washington, D.C. It is, ASCAC is a part of a growing family affair that's reaching out using the economic instrument if we need it, the political instrument if we need it, and also the social and cultural instrument if we need it. So have been in this thing early on, Africa, 1960 to Nigeria, Operation Crossroads Africa program. And so this preacher from Harlem, come up from Knoxville, Tennessee, from the bottoms of Knoxville, Tennessee, he was able to get out of that and tap to this African brotherhood because he went to Lincoln University. And who was at Lincoln University when he was there? An older teacher, Azikiwe, Nande Azikiwe, who became the head of Nigeria, who was there at a later time, a young man who was looking for an education at any means necessary, and his name happened to be Kwame Nkrumah. And so these brothers and sisters have hooked up a relationship to put the individual conflicts aside, put the ideological differences aside, because you're raising up in a renaissance. And this book by Cheikh Anta Diop is Toward an African Renaissance. Cheikh Anta Diop, essays on the Renaissance. And there is, and we are a part of an African Renaissance. And when you go into Washington, D.C., you got it around the greats there. You got, in fact, they used to take Nkrumah from Lincoln on the weekend. A friend of ours used to drive him down from Lincoln to Washington. And Washington, he'd be with the Howard Group, Hansberry. There was a Hansberry group that Nkrumah had a chance to meet. And with Hansberry was a young Chancellor Williams, was an adult Ralph Bunche, was a whole attempt of these brothers to take on the Negro establishment, which wanted to master the Greeks and the Romans and the European Christians, the Renaissance, and they were afraid to get deep in the deep water of Africanism. But Nkrumah saw these brothers from America who were into that deep water, and he said he appreciated it. And Philpott, the brother who drove up from Washington to Lincoln to take him back to Washington, Philpott also first took him to Philadelphia. And that's where he met the spirit of W.E.B. Du Bois, because W.E.B. Du Bois had done his Black Reconstruction. He had done the Philadelphia Negro, and he left in the University of Pennsylvania, that Reconstruction work came out of there. And so he got part of the Black family in Washington for his, to build on. He got the part of it in Philadelphia, W.E.B. Du Bois, and then he had to complete the triangle and come to the Big Apple. He had to come to New York, and there he met an elder, John Jackson, who became his mentor. There he met Schomburg, who had moved from an Afro-Caribbean world into the Schomburg Center, and he transformed the learning process. And so that's what I'm saying. And they were not just the men doing it; they also had the women doing it. Hansberry, for example, had a niece or whatnot, Lorraine Hansberry, who did the great play that transformed my life in 1959. I told my mother, we're not going to
Raisin in the Sun.
Raisin in the Sun. I took my mother there in 1959, and we didn't go to Lafayette College because there was somebody messing with me about my degree. And they said, you'll get your degree and we'll straighten out this mess. There's some professor who was a racist who said he was going to block me. And so the 25 fellows of the Knights of the Round Table, the leadership, they said, if Jeffries doesn't get his degree, we will not take ours. And so they wrote me a letter. Don't worry, you will have your degree. Don't worry about it. But you know, I said, no, it's a little more than that. I have some pride of self. So I told my mother, no, we're not going to that. I have a choice. I'm going to take you to New York to see Raisin in the Sun, Hansberry's work. And there was the great actors, and there was even the little child became Amos Wilson. All these people were people I grew up with. And so I'm saying that the real history, and my mother understood, she would have wanted to puff up herself and whatnot, but it was a question of pride. And at every level of my life, I've had to make the decision, do you submit or do you kick ass? And my thing has always been to never to submit, even with stupid Negroes who want you to get on your, and certainly with people who are coming from the Latino community, because they got a little Spanish or a little Portuguese in them, they think they better. I mean, I've been to Brazil. I've been to the spirit of Zumbi. I met Mompessa Dawn, who was a movie star in one of the great movies dealing with the Zumbi and whatnot. And Brazil has the worst type of racist thing. If you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, get way back. Brazil has institutionalized it. And so we have been joining in with the Brazilians who have been fighting it. And one of the great fighters of it was the greatest football player in the history of the world, Pelé. And I met him in 1965 in Abidjan when I was living there studying, doing my research on Ivory Coast. And everybody was all excited. The nation had stopped regular work and thousands of people were crowding around the stadium. And the army was there. I said, well, is there a coup? No, the army used that as an excuse to see Pelé. And the people started screaming and yelling. The man hadn't done nothing. The soccer game had not even started. The man just got out there and shook his thigh. He just shook it, and everybody went crazy. I never seen anything like it. He was such a phenomenon, just moving, tapping the ball. And so, of course, he did what he needed to do in Abidjan. But I also met Pelé in Brazil. And I also met him with Benedita de Souza, the greatest Black woman in Brazil, struggling for Black dignity. And we went to Zumbi celebration with Pelé, Benedita de Souza, and the governor of Rio. Oh, wow. And there he is, looking like my older brother. Look at him. Look, you can see him. Look at that light and that power coming from that brother. And so we went up to the mountains together with the president of Brazil. And I met him for the third time in my own hometown, Newark, New Jersey, because they have a heavy Brazilian Portuguese population, and they were trying to encourage soccer being an important part. So I met him in my hometown. Who has that type of experience? There's somebody else orchestrating this whole thing. And so we have to understand, we have to get into the intellect, into the politics, but into the spirituality. Raise that, put that in there, Charles. Because this is where it's all about. We're going to put the monument. Yeah. And then this is a book that a brother produced using my use of the pyramid triangle, economics, politics, and culture. And then the European pyramid is turned upside down.
Which one is at the top?
What's
at the top of the pyramid?
Synthesis. We've got to synthesize information. You get some information here on the politics and economics, etc. Then you get some opposite on this side, and then you interrelate the two and you synthesize it. We have to become synthesizers. If you're into English, then also get a knowledge of politics and interrelate the two. And at the center is the African symbol of Ma'at. We can't run away from the African thing. Everybody else moves to it for their development. And we're running away from it, taking a white, blonde, blue-eyed Jesus as the key. I don't want to beat nobody down. Nobody is more religious in spirit than me and my family, etc. We got all kinds of bishops and stuff. My mother's uncle brought her and the family up from Virginia, and he was he taught a religion at Howard for 28 years. Reverend E.C. Smith. E.C. Smith, he had one of the biggest churches in Washington, D.C., but it was more than a church. It was a center. It was it had a nursing thing. He was into making the church work for the community. And of course, right now in Atlanta, you have the Bronners. Coastal, outside of Atlanta, that's where the Bronner family has built the tabernacle, the Word of Faith tabernacle. And that's a part of the family root coming out of Kelly, Georgia, near Monticello. And so Bishop Peter Randolph Shy, he's the one who told us about our grandfather being lynched by the Klan. And he was a great man. And in fact, his tombstone, when I went down to finally see it, was an obelisk out of Georgia's red clay and whatnot. Came this obelisk. In other words, because he was the head of the Masonic brother, he also was leading the community, and they built a school on the hill. They built it with their own hands, with their own carpenters, with their own bricklayers. And out of that school came these youngsters that went on to boarding school and also Augusta in order to get ready for college.
Dr. Jeffries.
Yes, bro.
We have to get ready to conclude. So if you can kind of bring this together, summarize it for us so we have something to take with us, because you know you've gone over a lot of information. Bring it together for us so we have.
Well, I'd like to do that, and I'm gonna do it with this symbol because symbols are so important. We've got to come together as a global family. And more than that, an ancestral gathering, as well as the yet to be born. Mm-hmm. And the symbol, many great symbols have been placed around the world. And this one that you see on the screen is really where we have been, where we've come to, and where we need to go. That is something that was conceived by African leaders. You have the AU, the African Union, and that comes out of the OAU, the Organization of African Unity. And the AU leadership under the president of Senegal, Wade, and the president of South Africa, Mbiti, and others were asked to build a monument to represent where we have come from and where we need to go. And this particular monument is one of the greatest in the world. It is the tallest monument in the world, if you will. It competes very favorably with Jesus the Redeemer overlooking Rio. And Jesus the Redeemer in the 30s was given by the Italian Catholic community to the largest Catholic nation in the world, which is Brazil. And I've gone there every few years. We go to Brazil, and we always go up to Corcovado to touch the hem of Jesus and look out on this beautiful city, Rio. However, in 2003, I took my nephew, Dr. Hassan Jeffrey, his wife, and the family, and we went. And at that time, the Pedestal, I always felt some kind of vibe when I went up there. But in 2003, the Pedestal was opened up. And the pedestal on which Jesus the Redeemer was placed to speak to the Catholic world is the shrine of the Black Madonna of Czestochowa. The shrine of the Black Madonna is that which is what Jesus the Redeemer is standing on. So that is the Africanness of that symbol. And then the Pope, the great Pope, John Paul II, he was studying the shrine of the Black Madonna in Poland. So no candle smoke went up and blackened the Madonna. It's a reflection of the Africanness. And then the Statue of Liberty in the harbor of New York is welcoming the immigrants coming in from Europe. But the origin of the Statue of Liberty, and I told Mayor Koch this in my encounter with him in his office, the Statue of Liberty had nothing to do with the immigrants. Had to do with the struggle for freedom. Edward René Lefleur de la Boulaye came up with the idea. He was the head of the French Anti-Slave Society. And that's why the original statue of Statue of Liberty had the broken chains in her hand. Eventually, when they reworked it to be a Masonic symbol, they put the chains at the feet. But even the statue represents our struggle for humanity. And then this great one that the Senegalese other leaders were asked to build is taller than any of them. You see the steps going up, hundreds of steps going into the monument. It's on a quiet volcano, and it's the rise of the Black man holding on to his power, his rock, the Black female, and then holding the product of her sacred womb up to the Creator. And that child is not playing with the Father. That child is pointing to the future. He's not pointing north to Europe, where we usually look to sustenance. He's not pointing east to Mecca, where some look to sustenance. He's not pointing south to the rest of the continent. The young man is pointing to the Americas, African people in the Americas. He's at the closest point of the relationship of the continent too. And that's such a beautiful symbol. But that Mario Beatty, head of our ASCAC organization, and we were just talking about him and I and others took an elevator. You go into the base of the statue. Elevator takes you up 16 stories into the mind of the Black man. 30 or 40 people can be inside looking out at the Atlantic Ocean and the Dakar. And then inside of it, when it opened, we were there at the christening. I went with 350 people, including Jesse Jackson, and everybody went to celebrate this inauguration. And the beauty is that this brother's European French wife had prepared an exhibit of his great work with her first born son. And they had prepared all of Cheikh Anta Diop's great work on the origin of civilization, nation building, science, and this and that. And that exhibit, which is monumental, is inside the monument. And so I have a picture of myself, and Mbaki was the oldest son. He was a nuclear scientist. All of the four boys were into science. And then inside of it, when I went there for one of the great great conferences on African culture and civilization, I'm standing under the images in the initial hall, and above me is Nkrumah, also Du Bois, also Marcus Garvey, and others standing next to Gamal Nasser. Standing next to me is Marcus Garvey's youngest son, Dr. Julius Garvey. And so, and of course, his older brother, Marcus Garvey III, used to live 4 blocks from this house. My wife and I would walk out of our door, and for exercise, we walk over to Marcus Garvey Jr. and his great wife, Jean, and she would yell and scream, "The Jeffries are here." We would be in there for 2 or 3 hours. And then after that, we'd start our walk back. And most recently, they had the death of Marcus Garvey Jr., and we were able to participate in it. So I'm saying, and I see a nice picture of King and Malcolm over your shoulders. And of course, Malcolm is a part of us. His wife, Betty, and I were like this. His daughters, particularly Ilyasha and Malat. Malat was with me as she spoke about her husband in Martinique, and I helped her prepare her presentation. I spoke and she spoke. And so we worked with the family and the King, and there's King, Malcolm and King together. But for me, I see them together in terms of King was born in January, January 15th or so. I'm January the 19th. And when King was removed from us, and there was an invitation to go to Zimbabwe, I had the honor of taking Marty III and Mrs. Coretta Scott King to Zimbabwe, and they were treated like heads of state. That was an honor for the work that Martin King had done. And so we have that on tape. So for recently at the Selma celebration a couple of years ago, Marty and his wife were celebrated as the children of the struggle. Kathleen Cleaver was celebrated as a sister of the struggle. Dick Gregory's family was celebrated as the family of the struggle. And Rosalind and I were celebrated as the elders of the struggle. Now we have to understand this is what is happening among us, where we're reinforcing us in our spiritual travail, but our spiritual renaissance, rebirth, resurrection.
Ashe, brother. Brother Jeffries, this has been,
Hey,
we can write a book from this alone,
hey,
but
hey.
I gotta cut it right here, but I don't know what to say. Just thanks so much.
Well, I was trying to feed you some food for thought, but my gut is saying, why don't you try to think about feeding yourself? But I'm glad that we were able to connect. That's what we need to do. It's about family. It's a family affair. Frederick Douglass said it best. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men and women who want the crops without plowing out the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. And so we have to struggle and make it work for us. And there's the great Gaddafi. And his last great speech, I was within 25 feet of him when he spoke at the monument, and he made his statement to the world of the unity that we needed. And when I heard him speaking, I said, oh my goodness. And there he is. And I said that he is declaring war on the European world. And within a short time, he was removed. He was saying that he didn't come to the official opening, but he came to a later opening, and they gave him a chance to speak. And the president said, Mr. President, we know that you could speak, and they're greeting each other. We know that you could speak for 5 hours, but we need you to reduce your speech. And he did. But he said that monument is an inspiration, the rise of the family. And then he went on to say that Senegal, that we need a unity of the family. And then he said that Libya has oil and resources. South Africa has diamonds, etc. Nigeria has oil, etc. We need to find an economic plan for our nations. And I'm working on, he said, I'm working on something with Venezuela so that we get paid in gold and euros and not dollars. I said, oh my goodness,
that's what did it.
That's a declaration of war, a declaration of war.
Mm.
But he went on to say that Africans have this and they have that, but we need to have cultural unity. I mean, it was just a fantastic speech, but I knew that was the end. And of course, he had put so much money out to help African nations find their way that no longer was going to be the case.
Well, we're going to have to do this again, Dr. Jeffries. Again, thanks so much. And Brother Charles, thank you. Charles Mitchell, who's been assisting and putting up the graphics for us. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy and still in high demand. Many blessings to you, brother.
All right.
Again, thanks so much.
Okay, now the struggle continues. Salute continuum.
Absolutely.